Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Michael Tabirade. He is a performance coach, author, freelance contractor, and founder of Masteri Group. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ajay. I'm so excited to be part of this session.
Even I'm excited. Welcome to the show, Michael. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about the power of consistency. So we will come to this consistency part. First, I want to understand you are a performance coach right now. And right now you do this performance part in a different way. You come from a medical background. There a lot of people think about performance through different sort of insertion of different drugs and all. Here you are talking about. I want to understand more about what is the type of performance coaching that you do, and then we'll come to the consistency part.
It's a very good question. So I'm a performance coach and also independent consultant. So I do a lot of contracting and consulting for a lot of public sector organizations within the UK. And as you said, I've come from I'm going to say semi-medical background, but I've had about 11 years, experience within the NHS. So that's the National Health Service. And so a lot of the stuff that I worked on was around commissioning. So being very good and efficient when it comes to understanding how do you get good value for money when it comes to delivering services, but also making sure that you are paying for those services effectively. Secondly, service improvement. How do you look at an area strategically, operationally, or whatever it may be, and ensure that you are making the right sort of adjustments to reach certain sort of like objectives or aims? And so when it comes to performance, the big key thing is understanding, okay, what is currently happening at the moment? Where do we want to be? And what needs to be done in that middle? That's where the performance bit comes into play. So if you don't have a good understanding of that, it's not going to happen. And so I break that down into gather information. So you have to gather information, pursue the future, but also take action on the middle. That's what gap means to me. So when it comes to performance coaching or contracting or whatever it may be, it encompasses that ideology.
Right, Michael. When you are in the medical line, it is about the body. In performance coaching, it is also about the body, but also about a lot of other things. Help us understand what are these other things that help one reach, top performance.
100%. I think the first thing is really being clear about your vision. Okay. And if you don't have a good understanding of where you want to go, you won't really have a good assessment of where you are right now. So vision setting is key. It needs to be concise. It needs to be somewhat measurable. It needs to be relatable. All these things come into play. The second thing is aligned to that is the values. So values are the things that we deem as important to ourselves, and we get this through the experiences that we have. And so if you have a clear understanding of what's important to you based on what's happened in your life, then the decisions that you make determine your destination moving forward. And the third thing is velocity. Velocity is how quickly you want to move. And so if you understand that, okay, in order for my velocity to work well, I need to have the right systems in play, which is really routines, a set of processes set up in order for you to leverage certain behaviors from those values that you have. I need to ensure I have the right people around me. So this is ensuring you have the right coach, consultants, therapists, mastermind groups, accountability buddies to support your movement. This is also making sure you're in the right environment. Studies have shown that, again, when it comes to habits, when it comes to execution, your environment, those triggers and cues within that environment is crucial for that execution. And so if you want any form of sustainability or increased performance, your environment's going to dictate that stuff. So when it comes to performance, I take into factor all these things. You can see it moves from a very high level to a very specific and very practical approach when it comes to execution.
Absolutely. Now let's come to consistency part. In terms of performance, or in terms of we need to have, if it's a body problem, then you have to be consistent in taking the medicines or getting the cure. in terms of achieving your goals, here also you need consistency. But let's focus on the performance part of that consistency thing. What is this concept of consistency all about? Even laziness can be consistent. People can be very consistent in that approach. As they say, I am very good at doing nothing. And then they can be, help us understand first from the common person's perspective what this concept of consistency is all about, so that we learn the right kind of consistency and not the wrong one.
You raise a very good suggestive point, Ajay. You really do. Consistency can be good or bad. Consistency is just a description of someone doing repeat actions again and again and again. That's essentially what it is. And so we have heard about this concept of consistency because we've got a lot of gurus out there saying that you need to be consistent. That's the only way you're going to get, the business that you want or a good relationship, X, Y, and Z. But it doesn't talk about the quality of consistency. And so what I talk about is intelligent consistency. That for me is very important. So to have intelligence means that you are gathering information that is informing decisions that you're making that creates a certain level of adaptability towards your efforts. And so, for example, let's say, for example, you are trying to, let's say, lose weight as an example. Okay, you know that chips are not good for you. You know that too much rice is not good for you, even though it goes very well with certain things. All these different things may not be good for you. So you need to be in a position of consistently making sure that you either eat the right things and or, dare I say, restrict your diet a certain way, depending on what your sort of like focus is in terms of your approach. If we're looking at business, okay, they say that you need to be consistent on social media. You can be consistent. You could be posting the same thing again and again and again and again. But how do you know it's working? And so the intelligent aspect is what is not measured does not matter, so to speak. And you need to be able to be in a position of measuring qualitative stuff and quantitative stuff so you can have a good story, a good picture in your mind to make informed decisions so that you move towards success. And so consistency is key from that aspect. And so I would urge viewers to think about whenever anyone says be consistent, yeah, be consistent, but measure what that looks like so that you can make better decisions.
Absolutely. Be keep on measuring. But how do I get started? Is consistency like habit that you develop it, or it's a skill that you learn? How do I use the power of consistency for achieving any particular goal? How should you look? It sounds very simple, but I'm sure it's not that simple, because even measuring can be one sided. It is like, if you want to see only the good part, the analytics and everything will show only the good part. So how do I get to measure the right kind of consistency, so that I know whether I need to be consistent in this thing or something else? Help us understand how to get started with this thing called consistency.
It's a very good question. And to be honest with you, I'm not a firm believer in the idea of habits. Habits exist, don't get me wrong. There's so many studies to show this. But habits have been equated as a buzzword for laziness in a way. If I just do this for 62 days or 216 days, as they say is the long-term average, then it will just be embedded in my mind. The reality is there needs to be intentional routines. And so I go back to the book written by Robert Greene called Masteri. And essentially, he talks about three concepts. The first one being there needs to be a childlike curiosity. Okay. And that is something that you have, based on your experiences and stuff. So if you have a curiosity over a certain thing that you're trying to achieve, lean into that, study it, learn how things work. There's no pressure around this stuff. You just need to understand the art of how people are doing things well or not so well. And so once you're at a level of knowledge, so to speak, and my wife has said this before, there's only so much knowledge you can get until you have to take action, because why are you retaining this knowledge? Once you've moved into that space, you're moving into the space of practitionership. So that practitionership is where you do the smallest thing each day. I'll give you an example. On LinkedIn, I post every day. I don't do automation. I don't do any of that stuff. I just write my posts. And the first thing I did was, let me see if I can just post once a week. I felt comfortable. And then I was like, okay, this feels good. Let me increase it to every day. But I'm not going to put pressure on myself. It's every day. Okay. Next, it will be, let me see if I could do twice a day. But if I miss it, it's fine. If I can see that it works within the confines of my environment, then I'm going to stick to twice a day. And so you have to understand what that limit is for you. So that's practitioner. The final stage is then, okay, I've been curious, I've practiced and put in the hours. The final step is, how do I put my spin on it so it feels more natural? It's a feeling of being natural, but not necessarily actually being natural. And as long as people remember that there is intention behind it, that is key, because you are making a choice every single day that this is how you want to live your life.
Right, right. Let's look at it from the business perspective.
For sure.
For startups, they say, especially in Silicon Valley, that if you have to fail, fail fast. Without, I don't know if they give that chance to be consistent about something. How do you look at consistency without vis-a-vis that kind of failure? And in terms of personal failure, you see, there was this king, King Bruce and the spider we used to read in school about,
Mhm.
that how he failed 7 times, and the eighth time where he was very despondent, then he saw a spider on the wall trying to crawl to its position, and then he succeeded. So how does these things work out? How do we see at perseverance and consistency, especially in terms of business? When should we know that, okay, this is the time to move on from this? When should we know that this requires perseverance, this requires a little bit of more consistency?
For sure. That's a good question. It really comes down to your perception and your mindset. So there's two schools of thought here. The first school of thought would go, okay, I'm going to do this no matter what. If you're that person, then failure is just really a measure. That's all it is. But you're still going to pivot, navigate towards that Northern Star. How you do it doesn't matter, but what you do becomes important. So you're going to stick at it regardless. You've got the other person who will be like, okay, let me understand the parameters within this space that define success and failure. And am I giving myself enough of a chance based on these parameters, based on these different good practices and bad practices, to enable myself to be consistent? So you have to almost make sure that you succeed in ticking all of those criteria before you can make a clear conclusion that is best to pivot. But if you haven't given yourself that chance, then there's no point. Now, what some people may say within this lean methodology approach is that, okay, what you could do is do a pilot. You could do like a freebie or something, or a discounted course to see if people are interested X, Y, and Z. And that may be enough. But you also have to be able to recognize, even in that act, have you given yourself the opportunity to do that effectively and appropriately, to say, actually, maybe this is not necessarily the business for me. So it comes down to those two different mindsets.
Right, right. Let's try and look at it one more way, Michael. People say, that try new ideas, think out of the box. How does that work with, consistency? Because when you talk consistency, it might limit you about, thinking new ideas. Just be a bit more conformist, keep on moving on to the track made by someone else, and it will be an easy thing to achieve because we know where we are going. It is the goal that we have to go. So how do we again match here as a business leader? Should we look at more as consistency? Should we look at some new ideas, because new ideas are also very important for business or in life?
For sure. This is a great question. So again, you have to understand what stage or phase you are in terms of your business development. If you're at the beginning, yeah, try as many ideas as you want, and then you'll be able to do a process of elimination to understand, okay, this works, this doesn't work, etc., etc. If you're a bit maturer in your approach, what is going to be really important is a certain level of cadence and review and rhythm. So, for example, do you have board meetings or big quarterly sessions every 90 days to assess what is happening? What is happening in between, to understand what's happening on a weekly basis, potentially a daily basis, or even a bi-weekly basis, to understand, are you hitting targets? Will you make that evaluation at the end of the 90 days? Using things like SWOT analysis. So, for example, okay, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in this area? Because if you know what your strengths are, don't change those strengths. If you see opportunities, you can lean into those as far as much that the threats are not affecting you, so to speak. And then you can do things like a pestle analysis to understand how things are really affecting that consistent effort. So when you have these measures in place, those different cadences, those structures, and then those elements to review, then you can make a decision to say, okay, this makes sense in terms of pivoting and changing and trying new ideas. But if it's not broken, don't try to fix something that's not broken at all, you know? And there has to be a discipline, especially in this day and age, to stick at it. You know, most people, a lot of people are successful right now because they were in the room. They knocked at the door long enough. Now, that isn't the case for everyone. This is why it has to be intelligent consistency. And those reviews, those cadences, all of that stuff is important. So, for example, for me, I use the life navigation system that I've developed myself. This helps me understand whether I need to change course or not. And that stems from my values, my goals, and what I do day to day.
Right, right, Michael. In personal life or in work as an employee, we look for stability. We are consistent in our work, and that they say that this way you will achieve your goals. You do achieve your goals, but after some time, you feel that this is not what you wanted. Either in terms of business, also if you make a lot of money, this thing called self-actualization or wanting to so like in your case, 11 years, and then you wanted to get into something which was much more fulfilling. How do we look at that consistency is working positively towards us and aiming helping us take where we want to. Everyone wants some sort of a self actualization. The most consistent is the hamster wheel. Life can become a hamster wheel, and you don't want to be in that situation. So how do we look at that part? That consistency is fine, but how do we reevaluate even in terms of our goals? Because one goal may not be the one after reaching there.
100%. And it's a very valid question. You know, there's something that I've developed which was really oriented from the wheel of life, which I've called the 4 pillars of mastery. So this is looking at progress, performance, people, and personal. It's looking at different areas. And so there has to be some level of audit. Remember, I spoke about that gap analysis at the beginning. This is where this comes into play. You need to be able to assess, okay, out of 10, out of 5, how am I feeling right now when it comes to my career, as an example? Okay, why are you feeling this way? And those consistent elements, good or bad, will be shown. And then you have to define, okay, what does a 10 look like? What does a 9 look like? What does an 8 look like? And then you can start working up a plan to see how you can sort of make those changes. Now, of course, you can't cover everything. You just can't do that. Okay. But if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as you alluded to, there are some base needs and there are some other things that take priority. So, okay, yes, the sleep and everything else, we take that for granted. But maybe you're not getting enough sleep. And maybe you need to do something actually the night before to ensure that you're sleeping effectively so you have the energy, the concentration, and everything to move forward. Moving up from that, if it comes to your career not being effective, then that needs to be your sole focus. It has to be. And I would say you have to be almost aggressive with it, not in a negative way, but firm. This is what I'm going to be focusing on for the next 3 months at least. And I'm going to review how I'm effectively making those changes. And if that's not working for you, maybe it's the fact that you don't have the right skills. Maybe you have to get a vocational qualification. So you can see how this can spiral, but you have to be able to prioritize and know exactly what am I focusing on first, and have the patience and discernment to understand this will give more opportunities for the rest of Maslow's hierarchy to be realized, so to speak.
Right, right, Michael. You help a lot of value driven leaders aspire for greatness. How do I aspire greatness as a leader? By innovating or by being consistent with the old ideas? Help us understand.
It's a good question. Which one do I stick to? Do you know what? I think sometimes it's better the devil you know than the angel you don't know. So consistency is good. At least you can measure that. But with that comes innovation. It has to. I think if I'm sort of flipping it, if they're value driven leaders, then they know that actually their element of consistency in that way works. But because they're driven by values, that's where the intelligence thing comes into play. I would say innovation is key when it comes to situations like complexity, ambiguity, times of turmoil, such as we had with COVID-19 and everything else. That's where that innovation becomes really important to make sure that you have the right company culture, the right people, the right behaviors, and the right processes that support the betterment of that organization. So I can't give you a hard this or that. I think it's a bit of both, but yeah, I think they're both quite important.
Wonderful. You have answered all the difficult part of this, all aspects of consistency and everything else well enough for everyone to get their type of perspective that they wanted. That's wonderful. Now let's move to the simple part of it is the tips that you talk about. Three tips you talk about how one can stay consistent as long as they want to be consistent in the right manner.
For sure, for sure. Okay. Yeah, so I've got this concept known as understand, reach, expand. It's something I gathered maybe 15, 16 years ago. So the first thing is understand yourself. Okay. Understanding yourself is looking at your traits, your values, your vision, your velocity, all of these different things, and understanding others as well. How do they maneuver in that space is really the EQ model. If you look at self-management, all of that stuff there. So understanding is the first thing. The second thing is reach. So reach is where you are, I call it systemizing and sorting, essentially developing a plan and strategy to effectively create this level of consistency so that when you are executing on a plan, you have a way of tracking and measuring that, but staying the course. And so that may look like ensuring that you have the environment, whether that's a physical environment or people around you, to ensure that you are staying the track. And then expand. That is looking at what you've done and innovating, networking, growing, going beyond what you've done so that it's not just doing the mundane all the time, but is going beyond that. So the consistency is ingrained in what you've done previously. So understand, reach, expand is essentially my philosophy for life in terms of how I approach things.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now tell us about Mastery Group. You know what you do there, and how people can connect with you there so that they can make the best out of you, either as a performance coach, and also about your books that you have written, so that people can learn more from you. This is one episode. The books will understand more from you, about you, and the best that they can get from you.
For sure, for sure. Thank you for that. So, Mastery Group is essentially answering the question, how good do you want to be? And recently we have pivoted, which is interesting, which comes back to what I was saying. And we are essentially a coaching and mentoring organization that gives accredited coaching and mentoring. So, if you wanted to become an accredited coach, then we teach you those skills to become competent so you can do this part-time or full-time. So that's essentially what Mastery Group is. So if anyone's interested, they can feel free to message me and find out more information. In terms of the performance coaching, that essentially is looking at individuals who want to make enhancements in their personal life or their business life. I have helped many people within their careers too, but those are the two main areas that I'm focusing on at the moment. So those are that. And then with my books, I've got 4 books at the moment. So 3 of them are in the Understand, Reach, Expand series. So the first one, Understand, Reach, Expand, 15 super effective ways to manage your mind. The second one is Desire, the cornerstone between nothing and success. And the third one is Happiness, the fundamental keys to experiencing it daily. And then the final one, which is slightly outside of that, which is less around personal development, is The Power of Goals. So it's got really good tools, really good concepts, frameworks, and structures to help anyone, professional or personal, achieve their personal or professional goals. So yeah, those are my different offerings that I have available.
Right. And what's the best way for people to connect with you?
That's a great question. So I would definitely say check me out on YouTube. You can see my more relatable self and everything else, where I talk about life management, portfolio careers, etc., etc. But I'm more prolific on LinkedIn, and that's where you'll see me consistently posting. So they can
Right.
connect with me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed my session.